Hello everyone, welcome to my shop. I'm Robin. Today we're going to talk about Moore pattern scraping. This is the style of scraping where the scrape marks are like a crescent moon shaped. And as seen in flaking, a lot of flaking on machine tools for oil retention is that crescent shape. And it's also a style of scraping that's used for all of the actual scraping, not just for oil pockets. So one of the things I want to point out right off the bat is I am not a scraping authority or expert. I've done a lot of scraping, self-taught. I was inspired by Foundations of Mechanical Accuracy to go purchase 3 challenge 18-inch square surface plates and do the 3-plate method, and that's what I did. And that has proved to be a very valuable skill throughout my career in being able to scrape. A lot of machine rebuilding, a lot of various things. I don't scrape often, but when I do, it's typically a major project, a machine rebuild or whatever. So a lot of people have said there's just not any clear information on what the Moore scrape technique is. I am showing you the technique that I learned. I actually went to Moore, talked to the scrapers, and saw how they did it, and I'm going to be showing you that. There are even variations within people that work at Moore on the various nuances. So this is just a quick video strictly on the Moore pattern. I do throw in a few things about my thoughts on scraper blades and technique and application of Dykem and or the Prussian blue and red lead or equivalent. So let's get to it. Okay, so here is scraper, blued surface. I'm going to try to show you the mechanism of what is going on here. The crescent is a roll from start, a little bit sitting on this edge of the scraper, roll to somewhere in the middle of the scraper, and then back again through the stroke. So it's a like that. So my thoughts on how Moore pattern is done and how I've learned to do it is I always keep this knuckle roughly on this edge of the scraper, because the down pressure, or if you're a palm guy, if you have your palm, the edge of your palm on this edge, basically you want the down pressure to induce a roll this way. So inherently, as you push down, you push like this through the stroke, you're going to get a roll like this. The backhand back here is controlling the twist and a little bit of preload. So I've got just a tiny bit of torque this direction to counteract this, so that it comes back inherently. If you don't have that little bit of torque, you're going to press and lift off, and it's just going to stay straight. You need something to return you. So the finessing of getting the crescents the way you want them is the timing of the roll relative to the push length, how far you're pushing, how far you're rolling. I have a tendency to end up with too long of a tails on this edge, but it doesn't matter because the next pass cuts them off. But and this is one of these things where the more you get warmed up and the more you're doing it, the better you get at it. And I'm cold from having not scraped for quite a while. Yeah, you're really paying attention to what's going on with the stroke. So enough babble. Here we go. We're going to go. So you can see the pressure from my hand inherently is giving me this rollover. It's not sliding. It's not doing anything. It's a straight stroke. But you're doing it with determination, and ideally you want the fat part of your moon to cover the tails of the previous. And like I said, my tails are too long. I need to control that better. So by paying attention to that, I'm not rolling back as far. I'm making constant corrections. I'm just letting this pressure do that. Okay, so that's the whole thing, is this pressure. So it's just a downstroke. Yes, I'm making it look easier than it is when you start, but once you get the hang of it, you can't stop. It's very difficult to straight scrape. So now I'm going to try hitting these areas here. I'm intentionally doing this with this huge scraper so that you can see what's going on a little easier. So after a while, you can get your aim to where, my aim's not real good right here, but you get on a roll and you can see where you've been hitting, and you just drive around and hit your spots. See this very nice reflective surface here that you just saw me do with this scraper blade, is because of the lapped finish that I have on here. Really smooth. Doesn't have to be mirror, but it needs to be really smooth finish. And I do my lap lay in this direction also, not this way, so you have the best chance of getting a really smooth edge. That is what translates into this being that smooth, because when this lays flat, close to flat, very shallow angle, this surface finish on the bottom edge here is being directly translated. Think of this as a form tool with topography in it, is going to transfer directly onto this. So having it dead flat in that direction is important. Dead smooth is important to get a really nice finish on your scraping. Also, just relative to scraping grind, I do the same typical -5 degrees on this, but it's very important when you're grinding with your whatever method you use. I just use a diamond face wheel on my ball door grinder, but you can use a hand file, like a 600, 800 grit hand file can give you a very nice cutting edge, but you don't necessarily want a lap finish on this edge. Having a little bit of tooth in the grind on this end makes the scraper bite a little easier. If you lap this, you'll find the scraper almost has a little bit more of a tendency to skate. So when you're grinding these, the test for knowing that you've actually got a dead sharp scraper is just catch like this. When you push down and try to push this direction with the scraper, it should, right off the grinder, it should catch your fingernail like instantaneously and actually bite and stay put with almost no pressure. So that's when you know you've got a sharp edge. If it skates at all, it's not really dead sharp. And that dead sharpness is what allows you to do good work with a scraper. If you have to add a bunch of extra effort and push to get the thing to cut, you're just at a severe disadvantage. Another thing to note about a very wide, this is an 1.25 inch wide scraper, and using a very large radius, almost straight. And this is a very powerful tool for roughing because this keeps you out of trouble. When I see people roughing with a regular scraper, even a biax, you can dig holes very quickly. Very difficult to dig a hole with this when you use it at a very low angle, and make sure you're crossing your strokes as far as crossing the direction that you're scraping, going either direction, because this will bridge over holes and tend to keep you out of trouble. You notice I flattened this thing off, got rid of all that previous scraping in very quickly, and you could even see it taking off the high points very effectively. So one of my real strong suggestions is have a big, very large radius scraper to do your roughing. Tear into it, long straight strokes. As you saw in here, I stroked almost clean off the part. The only part I didn't do is where it was hard to start on the edge, and just flip the part around to do that. So this tool for roughing will save you a lot of time, a lot of agony of digging holes and looking, spotting over and over again. Get a big wide scraper like this with a very shallow radius. Use it for roughing purposes until you start to get some overall bearing. Here's my setup I use for lapping all my tools, my CBN tools, my carbide tools. This is set at a particular angle. This is just some kind of woodworking sharpening gizmo that has this slow speed. You'll see here when I turn this on, this has a relatively slow speed, which works well for lapping. You'll notice in the last scene that this was rotating in this direction, and for working on this side, we're just lapping the flat faces of those. That's actually more advantageous. But on normal tooling, and if I was going to rest a scraper blade on here to actually lap it, I put a reversal switch on this such that I can get this to go either direction. So very important to always be grinding down into the edge on carbide, and anything like that's going to have more edge chipping if you grind off the edge, meaning you're coming up and the wheel's dragging off the edge. You always want to be going down into it. Carbide's much stronger in compression than tension, and it is a brittle fracture mechanism of cutting. So you're going to get less edge chipping, better edge quality by grinding into or lapping into the edge. If I was going to lap a blade on here, I would just hold it uphill to my 5 degrees and you know, rub it on here. This is set at my normal 7 degrees clearance that I use for my carbide and my CBN lapping. So back here is the big 1.25" wide Anderson Brothers scraper, which is great for roughing. This Sandvik, very nice scraper. I like it. All these have been thinned to get a little more spring to them. Even the Anderson I milled out in the back to get some more flex in it. More flex is, to a point, is good in a scraper. Even this Anderson's been relieved, okay? And these are handy, being able to have different radii and just pop them in and out. These are my favorites for detail work. When you're doing a little dovetail or something, make a scraper that actually fits in that realm, okay? This one's just been straight butt soldered on here on the end. There's no bevel on this one. So this is nice for, you know, medium-sized dovetails. But then for smaller stuff, having a nice little detail scraper like this. This is a file that's been thinned down. This is only about, I'd say 40 thousandths thick here at the tip. But this has a bevel right here, where you see the difference in this face and over to this face location. This is a very shallow, maybe 15 degree, 20 degree bevel, where this is a lap joint for the silver solder, because this butt soldered would be too weak. So this is a very, very handy. This thinness here lets you get right down into the corners and do your scraping without a bunch of fuss. And this handle, I don't have any problem with these regular handles. I know a lot of people like the big things on the end, but I just never, nothing wrong with that. I just always been used to using the file handles and kind of like them. So don't be afraid to make a decent scraper that is good for small work. And you notice mirror finish on here, on the faces, and then radius to suit what you're doing. And too small of a radius is much worse than too big. Too small can get you in trouble in a hurry, where you're digging very deep pockets very quickly. So I would suggest, if you're going to err on your radii being too big, work with it until you say, wow, this radius is just impossible to work with because of it's too large. Then trim it down a little bit and work your way down until you find that happy place where the action is just right. This is my preferred method of doing application of red lead or your contrast color, whatever. This is just some scrap PET I had. I turned some daubers, has some Harbor Freight floor matting underneath this. This is natural chamois, the real deal, not synthetic, that's been pulled very tight. I've got a wire that's wrapped around here in a bead that's pulling the chamois down into the groove tightly. So I snug that, and then I pull the chamois mad tight, get it all, twist the wire up really hard, and then I hot glue over top of it so that the hot glue gets a grab on the chamois and surrounds the wire. Otherwise, the chamois will end up scooting right out from underneath it. So the evaporative process described in Connolly is this. You've got a dry, cakey, well dried out oil, red lead, Crayola, whatever your favorite compound is, but it's dry. It won't stick on here at all. And the beauty of that is to get just the right amount. And the evaporative part comes from using something like mineral spirits that evaporate relatively quickly. And I wet this just enough until I can pick up a little bit on here. I come over here, I use this. You can see I'm getting some action here. And the secret is not to get this too wet. So I'm looking at this and saying, okay, what kind of color am I getting on there? I'm just getting a faint haze. So I need a little bit more, a couple more drips of mineral spirits till I get some more a paste going on here. I can daub it on like this, which works well. This is a very, very matte look. The lights make it look like it's shinier than it is. But then you can also do this. You can swipe, and what you'll find is you wait as this evaporates. This will get tighter and tighter until you get to where you can just pull off just the kind of film that you want. This is evaporating. I can actually feel this tightening up, and you can pull this off until you get just what you want. No excess, nothing that's going to give you a smudge. You don't need to wipe with your hands because the chamois works, I think, as good or better than your hands for removing any particles. Still a little wet. I'm still leaving trails there. So you got to wait. In other words, I just fired this up cold turkey. Once you get it kind of tuned in with how wet you want it, you can maintain that. And now as this is drying, this is getting tighter and tighter, and it's getting where I can kind of smear off the excess. It kind of starts to cake on the dauber, and you can get just the film you're after. Now now that I've got this started, I won't need to be doing this much massaging each time. Okay, now that I've got this kind of tuned in, I might just put a drip on there, swirl this around, not pick up any more, and this will be good for quite a while. So this is the evaporative process. You're actually basically putting a wet film on, and as the solvent evaporates, you're leaving this residue behind. I'm just massaging and massaging here because it's still drying out. But you can see you can get a nice uniform film on there. And this, as this keeps drying, this will get to the point where it starts to pull it all off. And obviously you don't want to go that far. So that's what gives you control of exactly how deep and how thick of a film you put on. So that's the example with the red lead equivalent. Now, all this is several tubes of Dykem high spot blue. I put them in here. I put a Kim wipe on top of it, and then put several layers of bounty towels on top, and then I have a metal weight that I sit in here that just presses it. And basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to suck all the oil out of this, which is done here, and then I actually bake it a little bit to get it a little bit pastier consistency. So this is pretty tight. This is pretty sticky, but I did pick some up right there. So this is a little bit looser than my orange. So I will not go directly on the plate with that. I'll come here, I'll massage that around and see what I've got. Okay, and actually right the way it is pretty nice. Okay, that quick, I just put a nice uniform layer of blue on there that is has all the particles. So you can see these particles here. This is where the chamois has cleaned it off. Every once in a while I'll take a towel and I'll clean out the chamois, get the loose particles. But that is as good or better than wiping it with your hand to make sure particles on there. So making up a really nice dauber like this is huge time saver. I have these that I've made in wedge style to get into a dovetail where it's covered with the chamois on both sides. This really works nice. You can see a nice uniform, that's a light coating there. You can make it thicker. You can just add the same thing. You still use the, if you want a little more, you can wet the dauber with a little mineral spirits so that it gets a little looser and gets a thicker film, and adjust that way, but it's very fast. I'm not going to be scraping for a while. I wrap these with the shipping saran wrap stuff, and just to make them somewhat airtight so they don't dry out bone dry. And that works really well. And I just cut the saran wrap off when I'm ready to fire up again. And these containers are just handy size to keep it dry. They keep it from evaporating any more than it is, and they also form that lid section where you can work your dauber without adding color to get it to get to the consistency that you want. So this is an example of more pattern, relatively fine.
I would consider this, instrument grade scraping as far as number of points and sheen and contact area. Yes, a lot of this surface is generated with the precision ground flat stone, but that's not a bad thing. This very polished bearing area of significant area, and a polished plateau like that is going to stay still and perform well as an instrument surface much better than just a normal scraping. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to all different styles. I'm not saying this is, the be-all, end-all, but precision ground flat stones definitely help to have your scrape come out a little bit nicer. Okay, this is what I consider insanity scraping. This is roughly 5.5 inches by 2 3/4, or 70 millimeters by 140. Okay, and this is extremely small Moore pattern, but this was more or less, I was just seeing what was possible. Obviously not practical for day-to-day things, but for something that you want as a statement piece. This is, I took a picture of this and sent it to Tom Lipton saying, hey, you don't know me from the man in the moon, but this is an example of my scraping, and I'd be happy to scrape your level base for you if you'd like. So that's just an example of what can be done. I actually find this relaxing, but these are very, very fine scrapes. This is well over 100 points per inch, and it can be argued, what's the point? Bigger, less bigger ones, or a lot more smaller ones. But just an exercise in what can be accomplished, and so just wanted you to see that, to see how far down you go. And then here's an example of where get your muscles tweaked into that very short stroke, and still scraping for bearing here. This isn't just for looks. This isn't flaking. This was actually scraped for bearing. And fun.
I hope that helps some of you get a little better idea of more pattern scraping relative to the actual technique involved, the roll aspect of it. Like I said, I'm not an authority on it. I know that what I'm doing there is very close to what a lot of the Moore scrapers use, their technique. I have a friend that visits Moore relatively frequently and is also a scraping fan, and he's talked to several people there, and they all have their little differences in how they accomplish it. So what I showed is just a suggestion and something maybe to get you on the right track, and it's not the be-all, end-all, absolutely the only way to do it. And a lot of the techniques or things that I described may be controversial, and I'm not proposing that they are right. They're just what I use, what I find to work well for me, and if you don't like it, don't use it, and carry on. So like I said, hope this has inspired you to at least get out and scrape. It takes a while. This isn't something you're just going to learn in 15 minutes or half an hour, or you have to put some time in and some diligence, and don't give up. And once it gets a little bit easier, I find it very relaxing. It's like scraping and lapping are two of those things that are almost like therapy. You just almost rather do that than go on vacation. There's something just soothing and neat about those things. So yeah, I know I'm messed up, but okay, we're going to close off here, and hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back.